Welcome back to the Championship Crowd podcast. We've got an exciting pod lined up for you today. We're going to be joined later on by Mike McCarthy to give us an insight into Barnsley and Sheffield Wednesday, as well as Rotherham, as Barnsley look for the playoffs, whilst the other two are scrapping for survival. We're now joined, of course, by co-host Adam as well.
Hi, mate. How are you?
I'm good, thanks. How's everything for you?
Yeah, been another busy week, but another very enjoyable Norwich City week. So we're about to come and talk on about that, but 7 straight wins and life is looking very nice at the top of the Championship.
Exactly. Positive week for both of us. So we're going to run through those scores. At the top, it doesn't look like there's been much change there on the weekend. Of course, Watford winning 1-0 against Nottingham Forest, Swansea winning 2-1 against Middlesbrough, your team Norwich winning 3-0 against Luton, whilst Brentford's game was actually postponed. But midweek, it wasn't so good for Brentford, was it, Adam?
No, obviously we spoke about this with Liam last week, and it was, probably the big game of the week, really. Norwich versus Brentford. Brentford needed that win. They could have narrowed the gap to Norwich to 4 points with a win. But Emi Buendia's sensational strike was enough to see the bees off. And, Norwich realistically had enough chances to win that game 3-0. Pukki's missed a couple of good opportunities. Ben Gibson had a header that was well saved. And I think Norwich more than merited the win they got. And I think that was probably the most significant win of the season. It just kept that gap and actually extended the gap. And it also means that, Norwich are now pretty well set, in my opinion, to probably win the title. Football's obviously never a certain till it's over, but I would be pretty confident if I was a betting man right now.
Can't really argue against that. We've been at the other side of controversy this week. Of course, Stoke game, we got a last-minute penalty, and then Middlesbrough last-minute penalty. I think the Stoke one, non-biased point of view, probably a bit harsh on Stoke. But Middlesbrough, I think that's definitely a penalty. I think that was definitely a penalty. I guess, of course, the disallowed goal was a bit unfair on them. But I think it's a bit weird. Everyone just seems to hate Swansea now, and it's like they've forgot about all the decisions at the start of the season which went against us. But anyways, we're going to come on to now talk about the playoffs with Barnsley flying. 1-0 victory on the weekend to make it 7 out of 7.
Yeah, Barnsley are absolutely flying. Obviously, I saw a stat, they are 26 points better off at this same stage this season than they were last season, which that says it all. What Ismail's done there is sensational. And obviously, Birmingham needed this win as well because of their situation at the bottom. This is massive because they're getting to that point in the season where if they don't start to win games, they do put themselves at risk of relegation, especially with Rotherham having 3 games in hand on them. So massive game, massive result for Barnsley. And the strike, I don't know if you saw the strike by DK, but that was a great goal. Really good finish from the guy they brought in from the MLS, I believe. Really good strike.
Yeah, and Barnsley, they just look like they're going to do it, don't they? It's just the incredible run they've managed to put together. Obviously, it started with that Brentford win, and they just keep winning.
Barnsley, Norwich have played them twice this season, once in the league and one in the cup. And I have to say, both times, I think they've been the best opposition we played all season. Barnsley were really, really good in the home game. We beat them 1-0 when Dia's little bit of quality in a very tight, cagey game. Now, away from home in the cup, they were sensational. They've got that Callum Stiles, who I have to say I rate really, really highly. And he's someone, if Barnsley didn't get promoted, he's someone I would absolutely love to take at Norwich. I think he's got really good quality and he's an exciting young prospect who's hungry for football. So he's someone I would definitely love to see at Norwich. But fair play to Barnsley. I think they'll do it as well.
Yeah, so you think they'll do it as in they'll get in the top 6?
Yeah, I think they'll be top 6. It's difficult to say in the playoffs because my only concern for Barnsley would be the fact that if you have, say, Watford and Bournemouth in there, it's just they've got those big name players that on the day can be, they've got Premier League experience at the end of the day. That's probably the only difference. Although you would say Barnsley have nothing to lose in that situation. They haven't been in the Premier League since, I think, 1998 was the last time they dropped out. They had that one season up there. They would love to get back there, especially for next season when they get fans back in the ground. Imagine Oakwell, opening day of next season, the Premier League against Man City. That would be amazing for their fans. And as I think, we're gonna going to talk about, it could be that they get to Wembley with fans, their first game this season. So massive for them.
Yeah, they're definitely, it's going to be that interesting one. It's like the no fear factor that they haven't been ever in this position, those players before. But then you could argue the other teams are going to have those experienced players, like you say. But those other teams with experienced players, such as Bournemouth, didn't get a win on the weekend, 1-1 against Preston. So it means they're going to be struggling to find a place in the top 6, as well as Cardiff, who've been flying, still unbeaten under McCarthy, drew 0-0 against Huddersfield. Elsewhere, Reading probably look like they're safe in that top 6 places with a 3-0 win against Sheffield Wednesday.
Yeah, that's their third straight victory after a bit of a dip in form. And that's kind of been, for me, Reading's season. It's been very, very long runs of wins and then a bad patch, but they always seem to pick it back up again. And they've got some really exciting players. I wouldn't bet on Reading potentially getting promoted. I think even if they get in the playoffs, I don't necessarily think they're quite good enough at the moment. But you've got to say they're building a squad there that's exciting. A lot of really good young talent. That Elise, I think I've spoken about on him many a time. Really good player. So, yeah, the only problem is it's for Sheffield Wednesday. That's more of a damaging result for them and their battles against relegation this season. Obviously, Darren Moore's, that was his first game in charge, wasn't it? No, second game in charge. So, yeah, a big defeat again for them. And it was probably the scoreline that's more disappointing. And the red card that Burner got at centre-half for pulling the man down. And I don't know if you saw, but he actually ripped his shirt off like the Hulk. I've never seen that before. I saw it on the highlights show and crazy. Never seen that before.
Crazy stuff with Sheffield Wednesday. We're going to touch on them in a second, but just going back to those playoffs. So we've got Reading on 60 points, Barnsley 57 points with a game in hand, Bournemouth 56 points, and Cardiff on 54 points. Out of those sides, only 2 of them can make the top 6. Adam, where's your predictions going?
I'm going to go with Reading just on the fact of the position they're in. The only thing for Reading is they have got some very tough games still. I think they've still got Norwich away. They've still got Swansea. They've still got Watford. So they've got most of the sides that are above them. So you could say if they don't win those games, they might drop out. But I think probably on the basis of what they've been doing in the last 3 games, I would probably back them. And I actually can't look past Barnsley. I think despite Bournemouth's experience, the fact Barnsley have a game in hand, I think it comes down to midweek, in all honesty. I think if Barnsley win this midweek fixture, I wouldn't bet against Barnsley because of the fixtures they have left. Other than that, yeah, I think Bournemouth would be the only other one I'd maybe give a shot. I mean, I've always sort of thought Cardiff would get there, but a couple of draws recently against sides they probably should be beaten if they want to get there. And they kind of left themselves a little bit too much to do based on what they've done in the first half of the season.
Yeah, I think it's going to be an interesting one. I actually think Reading could get drawn back down. I know they've won their last 3 games, but I just think Cardiff looking in form, I don't want to say it, but they are. Bournemouth, they've got those players. I really do think they're going to have a late push. But Barnsley, you can't look past them with that game in hand. And it's a crucial game next weekend. We're going to touch on it later on in the preview section with them against Bournemouth. But we're now going to go down to see the lower league teams. We mentioned Sheffield Wednesday, of course, losing to Reading. Doesn't look good for them, does it?
No, I just think Sheffield Wednesday have now left themselves too much to do. Obviously, had they not had the 6-point deduction this season, you could say, well, actually, they would only now be, a point off. But the problem for them is, as I think a lot of people are starting to see, it's just they just don't have enough quality. They've got too many. I mean, their highest goal scorer is Callum Patterson with 6 goals, which, if that's your top goal scorer, I mean, defensively, I think they've actually not been too bad, but their goal scorer, I think they scored 25 goals or 24 goals this season, which I think is the second lowest. So when you're not going to put the ball in the back of the net, then that's where your issue lies. And I think Darren Moore's got a massive job in his hands if he's going to keep them up this season. I would be definitely backing them and Wickham for relegation for certs.
Yeah, Wickham do look down and out. A defeat against Stoke on the weekend. Sheffield Wednesday, so they're 7 points off safety. It doesn't look good for them. Coventry, though, have now put themselves in a stronger position with a 1-0 win against Derby.
Yeah, Coventry have been really good recently. I mean, Norwich played them and I thought they were quite poor, but then they went and beat Brentford. obviously got this win against Derby, and they've got some favourable fixtures coming up where Sheffield Wednesday don't. They have, I think it's Norwich, Watford, Cardiff in their next 4, which all sides in the top half of the table. So you probably wouldn't back them. But on the other hand, Coventry, I think you probably would back to survive this season. I think they've got enough. I think they've got some good quality players, especially in that sort of midfield department. I think that Gustavo Hamer is a very good player. Sam McCallum actually is on loan from Norwich at fullback's been doing really, really well there this season. So I think they've got enough, and I would back them and Derby and to stay up. I think the one out of the rest of them is Birmingham, who I'd put potentially at threat.
Yeah, so it's out of Birmingham and Rotherham probably. Rotherham, of course, now at 3 games in hand with that postponement on the weekend with a COVID outbreak.
I mean, Rotherham obviously did get that massive win last week, which, you know, we kind of spoke about it on the podcast last week. That was a massive game, and down to 10 men, the Dapo scores that absolute screamer, and that's a massive goal. That is a huge goal in the Championship this season, that, you know, last-minute strike. Only problem is 5 straight defeats before that. They weren't necessarily bad in any of those games. It's just the problem is the amount of games they've got in hand, which you could say that's an advantage because, you know, they're only 3 points behind, 3 games in hand. They'll look at that at the end of the season, or to come towards the end of the season, it's like, we only need 4 points. Issue is, will they get those 4 points? And also the injuries will start to mount if they have to play fixtures every 3 days, which, yeah, I don't know. I still would potentially be looking at Rotherham as my other relegation side this season.
There you go. It's going to be a very exciting end of the season, down at the bottom, and also the playoffs as well. One man who's going to keep a key eye on both of those is BBC Radio Sheffield's Mike McCarthy. We're now joined by Mike McCarthy. Cardiff fans, don't get your hopes up. I didn't say Mick McCarthy. It's Mike McCarthy. South Yorkshire fans listening in will probably know him. So welcome on to the podcast, Mike.
Good to be here. Thanks for having me.
Thanks for coming on, Mike. Do you want to just start by introducing yourself and what teams you cover and your job at the moment?
Yeah, so I'm part of the Football Heaven team at BBC Radio Sheffield. We cover 6 professional sides from the Premier League to the National League. So Sheffield United in the Premier League, in the Championship, we've got Barnsley doing brilliantly, Sheffield Wednesday and Rotherham, not so much. In League One, Doncaster Rovers still in the playoffs and looking good under Andy Butler at the moment. And then the National League, there's a bit of a revival for Chesterfield at long last because they've been awful for a long time, but it looks like things are turning around now for them. So it is a very, very busy patch, particularly in a season like this. The football never stops. But my job is to try and keep a handle on it, along with Andy Giddings and Adam Oxley, who are the team here. So we do our best.
Brilliant. Busy time indeed. We're going to pick up on those Championship teams you mentioned. And you mentioned their brilliant form for Barnsley is 7 wins out of their last 7 games. Where's that come from?
I think if you asked me that when Gerhard Struber left, I mean, the ambition was being questioned by Gerhard Struber when he left for the New York Red Bulls. He didn't think that he was being backed by the board. He said as much. He said, I don't think the board have ambitions like me to be, a club that's challenging, not just to avoid relegation every season. And here Barnsley are with a new manager who has brought in a few new players. But it's substantially the same squad that kept them up last season, and they are doing incredibly. The form has been absolutely fantastic. It is not always the best football to watch, but they are brilliant at what they do in terms of squeezing the game and making life very, very difficult for the opposition. And then in strikers like Cauley Woodrow and most recently DK coming in, they've got some real firepower as well. Carlton Morris has been getting in on the act too. The whole squad just feels like it is rolling on with some terrific momentum. And when a side is like this, you look ahead in terms of the fixture list and you think, well, what games are they going to lose between now and the end of the season? They are playing that well.
They are playing well indeed. And you mentioned the former manager leaving to go to the MLS. What about Ishmael coming in as the new manager? He's turned it around, hasn't he?
Yeah, it's been remarkable. When you think that Barnsley didn't win a single game in their opening 7, so Gerhard Struber was in charge for 4. Then Adam Murray came in and got some creditable draws in caretaker charge. But then Valerian Ishmael came in and said, right, my goal is to get to 50 points a bit quicker than Barnsley did last season. And of course, ironically, they didn't get to 50 points. They stayed up just about anyway. And they've reached the 50-point mark with almost a third of the season to go. They really went off the front foot. They got a few early wins, but the momentum has just kept going. And some of the additions that have really strengthened them. Callum Britton came in, and at right wing back, he has been irreplaceable to the extent that even in a season like this, they barely rest him. He's played 90 minutes almost constantly between joining and right now. Callum Styles, who is playing left wing back, but is kind of thought of more as a central midfielder long term, is making a brilliant job of that. The midfield partnership now with Mowat and at the moment Ramal Palmer, but Apo Helm's come in. Herbie Kane is a great option to have in there. They had Matty James for a while, but they haven't missed him since he went back to Leicester. And the back three as well has just come on so many times. You think to last season, they spent a lot of last season shooting themselves in the foot. And that just doesn't happen anymore. And I hope I'm not cursing it, but you just don't see the kind of elementary errors that young players were making time and time again. That experience they've had in the Championship now has clearly worked, but also Valérien Ismaël has tidied them up even further from a defensive point of view too.
Yeah, I think you mentioned that the young squad, there's mistakes. I know that about Swansea. Over the few years now in the Championship, we've started to progress into a better team. But you also mentioned there last year. Maybe talk a little bit about that. Of course, an amazing escape on the last day against Brentford, winning 2-1 on the last game, and also helped by Wigan getting a point deducted. How did they just stay up in the end? Amazing stuff.
Well, yeah, I mean, it started post-lockdown. I mean, just before lockdown, their last game was a 2-0 defeat against Cardiff, and they were 7 points from safety. It looked like such a huge challenge, but coming back into it, that they then started with a win at Queen's Park Rangers, and it just ran on and on and on. But it got to the point then when a couple of sloppy defeats came in, you think, well, they're still not going to make it. There was a 4-0 hammering at Stoke. They lost at Leeds in the third from last game of the season. And it just looked from that point, there was no way back. They had to win the last two and then hope that other teams didn't manage to do what they needed to do and somehow creep out of relegation at the last possible moment. To score the winner at Brentford in stoppage time to keep them up is just extraordinary. And yes, fans outside of Barnsley will argue, well, look, they've had some help because Wigan, had a points deduction. Barnsley will argue, well, hang on, we stuck by the financial rules of the Championship. Why should we be punished when another side, doesn't do that? So if you don't play by the rules financially, and Barnsley have made the case about, well, several other clubs in the Championship they're not particularly happy with. They've made claims about other sides not paying transfer fees on time and other allegations as well. They don't think that the EFL is particularly well run. And let's be honest, they probably have a case about that. So they would argue, well, they have full justification to be in the Championship this season because they played by the rules and others didn't.
Exactly. There'll always be that asterisk by Wigan. But as you say, Barnsley will think that is fair justice. So it was 1 point just above Charlton. That last-minute goal really saved them and helped them stay up last year. But now we can see them fighting for the playoffs. Do you think they can hold that position in the playoffs?
Well, if you look at the league table since Valérien Ismaël came in, I think they're third. So the idea that this is, something that is a flash in the pan, these 7 games have got them there. They've been doing this for a while. And you look at the fixture list they've got left, they may never have a better opportunity than this in this sort of season to give it a real go. If they make the top 6, I don't think they'll fear anyone in it either because of the way that they play. So at the moment, there is a huge mood around Barnsley that this could be a very, very special year. And it's difficult to look away from them at the moment because of the momentum they've got. It's such a powerful force in football. They really believe that they go this way, but they're spending an awful lot of time not talking about it as well. Valérien Ismaël is Mr. Game by game, one by one. Let's not talk about too much about the playoffs and all that sort of stuff. And actually that discipline is reflected in his squad as well. They are, a good bunch like that. So there's plenty of opportunities to get into the top 6, and I think they can take it.
Yeah, 12 games to go, sitting in the top 6 at the moment, looking strong candidates. And it always seems to be that team that comes up like a Barnsley at the moment in form that does well in the playoffs. You mentioned they probably won't fear those teams. I think it was the Brentford win that started off this amazing win. Come the playoffs, can they see themselves go into Wembley or maybe even beyond into the Premier League next year?
Well, what an incentive it is, because going to Wembley, if Barnsley could do that, and look, it's still a long way to go. But if they got to the playoffs and let's say they won their semi-final, Wembley could be the first game that Barnsley fans get to see live. What an occasion that would be. For whichever two teams in the Championship make the playoff final, because the restrictions would have been lifted by then, there could be some fans at Wembley. All, the roadmap goes as planned. So it's this huge, huge moment. And look, it could be an absolutely glorious moment for Barnsley. There's a long, long way to go. But at this point, I think it's silly to count them out.
Silly to count them out. Strong favourites. We're now going to turn our attention to those weaker teams down there, Sheffield Wednesday and Rotherham.
Yeah, so Sheffield Wednesday obviously not had a very good season. I think they're now on, 6 straight defeats? Obviously that defeat against Rotherham the other night was pretty much sort of a bit of a sword in the stomach for them. What's gone wrong for them this season? Obviously had the points deduction, but is that just the reason why they are where they are?
The problems have been coming for years and years and years. It was firstly an attempt to spend shed loads of money to get into the Premier League, almost take a shortcut to do that, and it almost worked. If they'd beaten Hull in the playoff final, which gets talked around here an awful lot, they'd be in the Premier League. Dave Chansiri is a hero. They've got to the top flight, but it didn't work. And the planning for what would happen if it didn't work was clearly not there, because there were players on big contracts for a long time. They couldn't sell anyone, and that led to the Hillsborough stadium sale situation, which was then badly handled, which then gets the 12-point deduction as well. And then you've had ongoing issues, it seems, to do with cash flow, because players on multiple occasions now haven't been paid on time. And if you're any Sheffield Wednesday manager, at the start of this season, Gary Monk was trying to attract players to a club that was going to start the season on -12. That's a difficult sell. And then when Tony Pulis is in charge, he says he wants a big transfer window in January. He gets sacked 2 days before the window opens. They don't appoint a manager until after the window is shut, and bring in 2 free transfers. And they just don't have enough. The problem for Sheffield Wednesday is now, what agent would say to their player, go to play at Sheffield Wednesday if you could go to almost any other Championship club, because there isn't the compelling sell at the moment, given the situation that they're in. So that's the problem that they've had. They've not got a striker really that is going to get them the goals to get out of trouble, and that's been a problem all season. And right now for Darren Moore, look, he's a great bloke. He's done brilliant things with Doncaster Rovers. If he gets Sheffield Wednesday out of this predicament, it will be almost a miracle.
You obviously spoke there about Darren Moore. Were you surprised that he swapped, obviously, a playoff position at the moment for Doncaster Rovers in League One to go to Sheffield Wednesday, who I think a lot of people have kind of said in the media that's maybe not the best club to be going to at the moment with all their sort of messy situation?
Yeah, well, look, I mean, Doncaster Rovers were paid a 6-figure sum to get Darren Moore to Sheffield Wednesday, which leads you to believe that he will be given the license to rebuild the squad in a way that he sees fit. It would be bizarre, because Dave Chansiri in the past has normally employed managers who are out of work. It would be bizarre to make that investment and then say to Darren Moore, who's got so many contacts and showed that with Doncaster Rovers by bringing in some brilliant loan signings from Premier League and Championship clubs to get Doncaster to where they are in League One, to then say to him, no, you can't do it. You must go through our recruitment team. Dave Chansiri as chairman will get the final say on all these signings. If you're not going to back him, then I don't see what the point is. That will be when it becomes very, very confusing for me. If Darren Moore is somehow prevented from rebuilding the squad in the way that he wants, then it won't make sense. If he has got the chance to do that, then it's a different question entirely, because, with the greatest respect to Doncaster Rovers, Sheffield Wednesday is a much bigger club. And there the attraction is. If you can be the one that can take Sheffield Wednesday out of this situation and get them back towards the Premier League, then all of a sudden you can make yourself very, very popular around here. And Sheffield Wednesday is a club that really, we say these things, flippantly sometimes, but they shouldn't be where they are. They really shouldn't. They deserve to be where they are right now because they've been badly run and badly managed for several years, but they shouldn't be. So the sooner someone can get a handle on the situation and turn it around, the better.
Obviously, another side up the road from them, Rotherham, obviously had a sort of a good win there against Sheffield Wednesday last week, but they had 5 straight defeats prior to that. Obviously, Paul Warne is a well-liked man. I personally like him as well because he's a Norfolk boy. What do you sort of think of their situation? Obviously, had a lot of games called off for COVID. I think Ita Karanka came out in the media the other day and was saying that he's not happy with their situation, and hopefully the EFL investigate that because he's thinking that they might get an advantage towards the end of the season. Do you think they're going to get an advantage towards the end of the season?
I don't think Rotherham United will feel they've got any sort of advantage because they're running out of midweeks, and they have a very small squad. So I think even the Coventry game coming up, which is as we speak, is still on. They will probably come out of isolation Thursday or Friday before the game. They may have one training session before they're able to play that game. That doesn't sound like an advantage to me. Against a relegation rival, it's going to be hugely tough. So they've had this issue before. Obviously, over Christmas, they had a couple of games called off, and when they came back to face Barnsley just before New Year, again, the isolation period was actually 9 days because the EFL said that was fine, even though the government was saying it should be 10. So Rotherham United weren't particularly happy with that either. Again, perfectly understandably. But look, Paul Warne is dealing with probably the second lowest budget in the Championship, and he is keeping this side within touching distance of safety. If he keeps them up, he's up there with, Manager of the Year material because it is such a difficult job that he has. But he manages to build a squad full of really great characters. And without fail, whenever you speak to any of the Rotherham United players, you don't get standard football interviews. You talk to real people. And that is what he's able to build there. He's got, such a camaraderie and such a togetherness that they are able to play beyond what, footballing metrics and logic would suggest that they can do. And look, that Freddie Ladapo goal will go a long, long way to building their confidence that they can survive. Birmingham and Coventry can still be caught, and maybe a couple of others as well. I don't think Huddersfield are particularly safe yet either. So there are plenty of sides for Rotherham to aim at, and they've got a chance.
Would you say the effectiveness of Rotherham tending to beat those sides that are down there around them is going to play into their hands sort of going forwards as an advantage towards the end of the season?
Yeah, but I think they'll feel they haven't been that far out of games where they've played some of the top sides. I mean, they went to Bournemouth the other week and it was a 1-0 defeat, but they had chances to take a point there. And you mentioned that 5-match losing run. I think 4 of those defeats were 1-0, and they were in pretty much all of those games. So they will feel that, they're never far away from it. If they can get 1 or 2 moments to go in their favour, and that's what they need, then of course, they'll have a chance. And that's all I think that Rotherham United fans can ask, that they can get to the last few games of the season and have a chance. And if they've got that, then, the spirit might carry them.
Do you think either of these sides actually have a realistic chance of staying up this season, or which one do you think is more likely to stay up?
If I had to pick one, Rotherham United would be the one that I would pick as one that could stay up. And I'd say at this point, it's probably about 50-50 whether they survive or not. Sheffield Wednesday, I wouldn't even want to put a figure on it. It is a very, very long shot from this position. 7 points to make up with 12 games in which to do it. It's a huge ask. So that is, going to be, as I say, near miracle territory if Sheffield Wednesday survive. But Rotherham could do it. I've not been particularly impressed by Birmingham. Huddersfield seem to be on the slide. Coventry might just have enough. But, one of those sides could well join the bottom 3, and Rotherham might well be able to displace them.
You mentioned Coventry there. So on Saturday, big game, isn't it? Rotherham versus Coventry. If that game does go ahead, what's your score prediction for that?
Oh gosh. Well, I've got to go with the Millers, haven't I? 2-1.
2-1. And then obviously Barnsley playing midweek as well. So against Derby, where do you see that going?
Well, it's difficult to look away from Barnsley at the moment, isn't it? I mean, they have been relentless. I saw the reverse fixture earlier in the season, and this was in the time when Philip Cocu was on his way out, but not quite gone from Derby County. And Derby had plenty of the ball, but were completely toothless. and Barnsley were able to pick them off and score a couple of very decent goals. So again, probably tight, but I would fancy Barnsley again.
Score?
1-0.
1-0. Bit more challenging game on the weekend though. Bournemouth have to.
Well, absolutely huge, that, isn't it? But given the situation they're in, let's say they beat Derby in midweek, they can afford to lose that game and stay in the top 6.
Yeah.
This is the thing about Barnsley's fixture list now. They've got to play all of the bottom 7 between now and the end of the season. And you'd say 7 wins probably gets you into the top 6. So there's an awful lot of reasons why Barnsley, can go to Bournemouth and think, well, a point's a decent result. And again, you start thinking about that, you start plotting ahead, that there is real optimism around what the Reds can do.
But I'm sure if they win against Derby, they want to make it 9 out of 9, won't they?
Well, this is club record stuff now. They've never won 7 in a row in the second tier before. 8 in a row obviously would be, another building on that. And well, not getting too far ahead, but 9 in a row would be outstanding. I mean, it takes an awful lot to even get towards 4 and 5 in the Championship because it is such a competitive league. So it kind of shows what an extraordinary run this is. If they can keep it going, then, sky's the limit really for them.
Sky's the limit. So are you going for a draw on the Bournemouth game?
Yeah, we'll call it a draw.
Call it a draw. Last one, Adam will be interested on this. Sunday, Sheffield Wednesday against Norwich. Any hope for Sheffield Wednesday?
Well, Wednesday fans will say this is typical Wednesday, isn't it? That this is going to be the sort of game that they win in some kind of scrappy way, and you couldn't rule that out. Darren Moore will actually have a full week to work with the players, which he's not had. In fact, it's been very rare for any manager this season to have a full week to actually work with their players. And at the reverse fixture, they came so close to winning it. They were 1-0 up into the final 10 minutes. It was under Tony Pulis. At times they were playing a back 6 almost to try and keep Norwich out and couldn't quite do it in the end. So there is, it's a contest where something could happen in their favour. You could have, well, almost a Julian Burner moment from Norwich. If someone loses their heads, and it goes in Wednesday's favour for once, then that can swing it. But I'm not saying I'm going to put any money down on it, but they have to hope. They have to hope because that's all they've got at this point. They have to find something from somewhere.
They have to hope indeed. Tune in on that game on Sunday. Thanks so much for coming on, Mike. Loads of insight into those teams there in the Championship.
Pleasure.
Adam, so we just heard about Mike's views about the score predictions. We'll start with that game on Wednesday night. Barnsley are playing Derby. Do you see Barnsley winning that?
Yeah, because obviously Cameron came on this podcast 2 weeks ago and he said Derby was safe. Derby, after the last couple of games, aren't safe. I mean, I would still expect them to stay up, but they probably also do need a win in this game. But I think I'd have to back Barnsley just based on the fact they're on this record winning run of 7 straight wins in the second tier. And I would back them to extend that. I think their confidence is through the roof at the moment. They've not really got any major injuries that I know of. So you've got to look at that and probably say Barnsley are going to win that. I'm going to go 2-1 Barnsley, I think. What about you, Chris?
Yeah, I think you just can't deny the informed side in Barnsley. So I think they will pick up another win. I think they'll keep a clean sheet. I think it'll be a 2-0 win to Barnsley. I think they'll win that. But they're going to have a much more challenging game on the weekend. A massive game. What they call nowadays the 6-pointer against Bournemouth. Yeah,
obviously Bournemouth had a bit of a weird run of, and they obviously appointed Woodgate as a permanent manager. He's had sort of an up and down start, a few good results, a few meh results and a few poor results. So this is a massive one. I mean, if Bournemouth want to get in the playoffs, if they lose this game, I honestly think that's probably their hopes gone because that would be, 10 games left and they could have potentially, with Barnsley getting 2 wins, that gap could be almost unmanageable to be able to break down. So I would probably go with, because both sides won't want to lose it, I think I'm going to go for a draw, as you probably would. I think it'll be a cagey one, probably not going to be many goals. I'll go 1-1.
Yeah, I think as we talked about with Mike there, it would be great for them to get their 9 out of 9 wins if they can come the Bournemouth game. But I think inside they'll be thinking, if they draw this after winning the week, if they do get that, then they're putting themselves in a very strong position. But I think Bournemouth will do it. I think they'll turn up for this big game. I think they're going to win 3-1.
Obviously, we've got massive games at the bottom there, which obviously I discussed with Mike. The first one is Rotherham against Coventry. Obviously, Mike said about Rotherham, they might only have one training session before this game. How do you think that's going to impact them?
I think it's going to be hard, isn't it? We've seen it with a few teams. I think you'll noticeably know, like Ipswich have really struggled with the COVID, and a few other teams, Newcastle in the Premier League, just coming back after COVID has really hit teams. And it's going to be interesting to see how it does for Rotherham. With a massive game against Coventry, both of them, that's another 6-pointer. If they win that game, then they're only putting themselves 3 points off, a few points off Coventry. So they need to go out to win it. But I think it's going to be a tiring game, especially if most of their players have had COVID in the last week.
Yeah, I think I'm going to go with a Coventry win as well. Just on the fact Coventry have actually been very good recently and Rotherham haven't been playing. So I think based on despite the fitness aspect, you could say that Coventry have been playing, so they'll be more tired. But on the other hand, Rotherham haven't been playing, so they've got no match fitness. So on the basis of that, I think we're going to back Coventry. I'll go 2-0 Coventry, I think.
Yeah, and now it's been a few weeks since they've had that momentum win against Sheffield Wednesday, that they're not going to have that feeling of coming into the game in form. So I think it is going to be a hard one. Elsewhere, Sheffield Wednesday, Adam, Sunday against you lot.
Yeah.
They're not going to win, are they?
Well, no, because, I went to the actual reverse fixture at Carrow. It was the first game I went to this season with fans in, 2,000 of us. And Sheffield Wednesday were good. Obviously, they were under Tony Pulis at that point. Josh Windass bagged a goal against us, something like the 65th minute. And we actually struggled to break them down. Defensively, they were quite solid. And they haven't actually been defensively too bad this season. And we struggled. It took Josh Martin off the bench and a Max Aaron's late winner to seal that win. But I think since then, both sides have come on in different ways. Norwich have just pretty much powerhoused their way through the Championship with the exception of a little bad run in February time. Other than that, being sensational. And Sheffield Wednesday, on the other hand, have obviously sacked Pulis since then. They had a caretaker boss in charge, and now they've got Darren Moore, who ultimately doesn't have his own squad yet. He's just inherited the players that were already there, and they lack confidence. They don't believe they'll stay up, and for that reason, the way Norwich are playing at the moment, I would back Norwich to extend that run to 8 straight wins. And I think that man, Todd Cantwell, if you're viewing on Dodie Sports, you'll see the shirt behind me now. I think he's going to have an influence on this game, as he did the other day, and I will be backing Norwich to win this, I think 3-1.
Yeah, 6 defeats out of 6 for Sheffield Wednesday. But I can see them just doing a surprise. I think, as Mike touched on there, it's one of those weird games that they could just come out and win. It sums up Sheffield Wednesday, as he said. I'm going to go for a 1-1 draw, Adam. I think Norwich now, they think they're comfortable. They are pretty much comfortable. It's one of those periods now they're going to maybe have a blip. So I think it's 1-1 I'm going for.
Fair enough, Chris. I don't actually agree with you, but I get your optimism.
Still hoping to catch Norwich at the top. We'll see about that. Elsewhere, Swansea do have a game in midweek. So we'll be playing one of our midweek game in hand against Blackburn. Adam, can we win that?
Blackburn are such a weird side. I think on paper, they've actually got some very good players. Harvey Elliott, is doing very well there this season. They've got some good forward men. Adam Armstrong, I think, is he 3rd in the top goal scoring ranks? So, you think they should be doing better than they are. A trip to Ewood Park for Swansea, that's never going to be easy on a midweek fixture, you wouldn't think. Only thing I would say is Swansea, the last few games, have been massively lucky. I don't know what your thoughts are on these decisions, Chris, or you have spoke about it, but to me, they got very lucky on the game against Stoke. And I think even on Saturday, the goal that Middlesbrough had denied, and I personally thought the penalty was also a little bit questionable. So only problem is it depends on how they react to that. Obviously, that could be confidence through the roof because they picked up 6 points where they probably shouldn't have done. So you probably say it'll play into it. Based on the fact Blackburn got a good win away at Millwall the other day, I think it'll be a difficult one. I'm actually going to go for a draw in this. I think it'll be a 1-1.
Yeah, it's a big game, 6 o'clock kickoff. I'm obviously going to back Swansea. But as you say, we haven't really been playing that well. It's been interesting on like Twitter. People are like, oh, they're not playing like Barcelona, Manchester City. And like, we're fighting for a chance to get in the Premier League. We don't have to be that old Swansea, that amazing football. It's like people are getting annoyed at us for not being an amazing side. Every other team go up this way. We're not playing amazing, but we're getting results. And that's how the big teams win trophies. And that's what we're doing. And I think we're going to win that. I think we need to win that. Blackburn, not really fighting for anything. They do score goals, but we keep clean sheets. I'm going for 2-0 victory.
Then your Welsh rivals have a massive game at the weekend. Obviously, a game they actually won the reverse fixture. Obviously, Watford are so good at Vicarage Road, but Cardiff won that reverse fixture. And this time they host Watford at the Cardiff City Stadium. Obviously, Mick McCarthy, I think he's unbeaten so far in his tenure at Cardiff. So how do you think that was going to play out, Chris? Obviously, we'll both have eyes on this for, obviously, the Watford aspect, but you also for the Cardiff aspect as well.
Massive game. So obviously Watford trying to get the automatic place. Cardiff really pushing on for the playoffs. We've touched on it before. We've got Reading, Barnsley and Bournemouth all fighting for those 2 spots with Cardiff, and they're going to have to go out there and win. I think they will. I think they will. Mick McCarthy hasn't lost, and Watford, they haven't looked great away from home. I know they're sitting at the moment second in the league, but I don't get how. I know they've got the players. They've probably got arguably the best squad in the Championship. But I think Cardiff will win that. I just don't rate Watford away from home. I'm going to go for a 2-1 victory for Cardiff.
I'd have to agree with you. I think Cardiff, I actually did watch parts of the game against Huddersfield the other night, and they weren't actually great against them at all. But I think obviously Huddersfield had their own battles this season down at the bottom, so they were very happy to try and settle for a point. Watford, as you touched on, their away form is awful. They need to turn that round in these last 11 games, because if they don't, that will be what costs them potentially an automatic spot, and they'll end up in the playoffs for that reason. But I think I'll agree with you. I think Cardiff will nick it as well. But I'm going to go 1-0. I don't think Watford will score.
1-0. And then we also mentioned those playoffs. Middlesbrough and Stoke fans will be listening into the podcast thinking, we've still got a chance. If they think they've still got a chance, they need to beat each other. Middlesbrough versus Stoke on the weekend. So you've got Middlesbrough on 50 points. So that's 7 off Barnsley, and Stoke on 48 points. You're going to have to think they have to win this game. Who's going to win it?
I mean, both sides will obviously be hoping that Derby pick up the win on Wednesday, and they will both be hoping that Bournemouth result is a draw, because then it means if either of these sides do pick up the win, they narrow that gap. Both of these sides will obviously be aggrieved at the refereeing decisions that have gone against them in the last week against Swansea. Obviously, both had very much a sort of a similar situation in terms of that. So both of them will have sort of extra firepower and that fire in the belly to really, put something right here and let's get a win. Neil Warnock obviously has set up Middlesbrough recently. They look very solid. They look like a good Championship outfit. I don't think they'll be in the playoffs, but they look solid. Stoke are very up and down. And for that reason, I'm actually going to back Middlesbrough in this one. I think I'll go with a 2-1 Middlesbrough.
I've obviously seen both these teams over the last 2 games. I'm going to be influenced by the many Welsh players playing in the Stoke team. I think they're going to win this. I've been thinking Stoke are going to come up and have a late push for the whole season, really. They did look strong probably a good 3 months ago, and then had that massive blip in form. They have started getting a few results recently. Were unlucky against us. I think they're going to win this one 2-1.
Yeah, so some massive fixtures there in the Championship this week. We do really hope you've enjoyed this podcast. We've both personally enjoyed it. Mike was really informative, and obviously go follow him on Twitter and, go listen to his show. If you're a South Yorkshire resident, then listen to that, because, he's a really insightful bloke. As usual, we are on all of the platforms we are usually on. So that's Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, and many others. We're also on WD Sports YouTube channel. So catch us on there if you prefer us in a visual format. And obviously follow us on our Twitter page at ChampCrowdPod. Chris, anything else you want to add to that?
No, pleasure having you on again as usual, Adam. And it was great to speak to Mike. Thanks everyone for listening in. See you next week.